Hey guys, tonight we journey to ancient China, Tang Dynasty era, where the night air hangs heavy with incense, charcoal smoke, and the faint hiss of duck fat crackling in bronze woks. You're wandering through a market that somehow still buzzes after sundown. Red lanterns swing from frayed silk cords, casting drowsy shadows on rows of spices, tea bricks, dried mushrooms, and, wait, there it is. A hunched old man in a squirrel pelt cap is gesturing for you to come closer. His table is cluttered with brittle scrolls, cracked inkstones, and something that smells oddly like pickled ginger left in a library. You lean in. He unfurls a scroll inked in cinnabar, its edges crumbling like sesame brittle. You recognize the brushstrokes, not words, but measurements, ingredient lists, cryptic timings, pluck lotus root by the second crow. A recipe. Or maybe, many. It reads like a fusion of kitchen manual, calendar, and deeply cryptic poem. The symbols shimmer slightly under the lantern's glow, and you're pretty sure one of the stains is soy sauce from 800 years ago. You probably won't survive this, by the way. At least not if you plan to follow this scroll too literally. Some ingredients are extinct. Others may never have existed. One involves milk from a dragon's dream. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wrap the scroll gently and tuck it beneath your robes. The old man grins with exactly 3 teeth and vanishes behind a curtain of hanging fish bladders. Naturally. That's how your trouble begins. You trudge through the winding back alleys of Chang'an, the Tang capital, with a growing sense that the scroll is more than a novelty. The characters don't match standard court script. Some symbols look Proto-Tibetan. Others resemble old merchant cipher. A scholar once told you that recipes were among the most closely guarded secrets of the imperial court, some encoded, others cursed. And it gets weirder. As you walk, the scent of the scroll grows stronger, sweet and peppery, like candied ginger cooked in sesame oil. Every time you pass a food stall, something in the air shifts. A vendor selling steamed crab buns pauses, sniffing. A woman pouring tea tilts her head, eyebrows raised. The scroll is triggering memories. Or hunger. Maybe both. Historians still argue whether culinary scrolls like this were ever truly standardized. Some claim they were written in riddle form to keep cooks loyal. Others suggest they were never meant to be used, just ceremonial offerings to the kitchen god. At home, you unroll the scroll onto your table. It runs the length of your entire sleeping mat. One section seems devoted entirely to pickles, pickled plum, pickled radish, pickled goose tongue. You hope that's a metaphor. Another lists measurements like half a turtle's mood and one sorrowful glance of a concubine. A more legible portion details a dish involving lotus roots, fermented chili bean paste, powdered pearl, and something simply called mirror broth. You're no chef, but even you can tell this isn't your average noodle recipe. Then, faintly, just faintly, you spot a court seal, red wax, half-smudged, but unmistakable. The emblem of the Tang imperial kitchens. And just like that, your plan to spend the night rereading scrolls by candlelight becomes a wild idea. Sneak into the old palace ruins. Find the original kitchens. Maybe the scroll's origin lies there. And if you're caught trespassing in a site considered sacred to a long-dead dynasty? Well, you've survived worse. Like that time you accidentally ate fermented scorpion eggs. But that's a story for another scroll. You pack up. One scroll, one lantern, and one deeply questionable plan. You slip out before dawn, the sky still dark as squid ink, the stars slowly giving way to a watercolor wash of gray. The city's quieter now. The last round of drunken scholars has stumbled home, and only the sweepers and monks are up, brushing dust from the stone roads and chanting beneath their breath. You pull your robes tighter, it's chilly, and the scroll feels oddly warm against your chest. The Tang imperial palace looms on the northern edge of Chang'an like a dragon curled into sleep. It's vast, guarded by old walls now mottled with moss and soot. You're not supposed to be here, not this early, not without papers. But you've got something better: curiosity, terrible impulse control, and a pocket full of roasted broad beans for bribes. You slip through a breach in the east wall, a crack in history wide enough to admit a fool. You tiptoe through abandoned pavilions, duck under fallen beams, and finally find it, the entrance to the kitchens. They call this part of the palace the kitchen of 10,000 cents. Not officially, of course. That's just what the locals whispered. Some say the smells never left. Others say something is still cooking. Inside, it's surprisingly intact. The clay stoves still line the walls, some with blackened cauldrons resting on top. You run a hand along a tiled counter, still greasy after centuries. There's a layer of dust over everything, but your fingers brush against something odd, a fresh smear of, is that soy paste? Historians still argue whether these palace kitchens were staffed by eunuchs, monks, or elite culinary guilds. Most agree it was a mix, but one thing's certain: only the emperor's most trusted could touch his food. Some dishes took days to prepare. Some required ingredients from every corner of the Silk Road: saffron from Persia, cardamom from India, shark fins from the southern seas. There was even rumored to be a dish made from snow harvested in the Kunlun Mountains. As you explore, the smells intensify. Something smoky. Something sweet. Maybe even sesame oil? It doesn't make sense. There's no fire, no flame, and definitely no chefs. But your scroll pulses faintly, the cinnabar ink glowing like embers. You kneel by an overturned clay urn. It's sealed with wax, ancient and brittle. You pry it open and inside you find preserved ginger slices, still glistening. How? You nibble one cautiously. The flavor floods your mouth, bright, spicy, oddly floral. And then something stranger: your memory floods with images. A kitchen roaring with life. Steaming bamboo baskets. Saffron-robed chefs barking orders. One of them looks directly at you and says, "The emperor awakes." You snap out of it, startled, mouth still full of ghost ginger. Maybe you're hallucinating. Maybe this ginger was laced with something else. But something tells you this scroll is more than an artifact, it's a key. And it's unlocking the past. You hear footsteps. Not modern ones, these are light, fast, slippered. You duck behind a marble pillar as a figure enters. A cook, dressed in silk apron and bronze chopstick hairpins. She moves like she belongs here. She's humming, and as she hums, she ladles invisible broth into invisible bowls. You whisper, "Excuse me?" She doesn't jump. Doesn't scream. Just glances sideways, then says, "You're late. The emperor's hungry." You're swept along. She presses a bowl into your hands, it's empty, but you feel the heat. Smell peppercorn, duck, lotus leaf. You follow her through the kitchen's maze until you reach a high lacquered door with dragons carved into it. "The taster is dead," she says, offhand. "You'll have to do." You blink. "Wait, what?" She gives you a long, unimpressed stare. "It's porridge. Not poison. You'll live. Maybe." You glance down at the scroll. The next symbol is glowing. It looks like a bowl. And just like that, you're shoved through the door and into a room with enough gold to blind you, and a silk-draped couch where someone snores softly behind a screen. The emperor. Waiting for breakfast. From you. No pressure. You stand there like a goose in a sandstorm, clutching an invisible bowl of porridge and wondering what decisions in life led you here. The emperor, who may or may not be real, snores gently behind a woven screen embroidered with phoenixes. Golden light from the rising sun spills through the high windows, catching on beads of condensation clinging to a jade teacup nearby. You shift awkwardly, and the bowl in your hand suddenly isn't empty anymore. It's warm. Thick, aromatic steam rises from the surface. You catch notes of barley, apricot kernel, and a strange floral sweetness, like chrysanthemum and something else. Something unplaceable. Is this even real food? You sneak a taste. It's the best porridge you've ever had. Somehow comforting and confusing at the same time. Like a childhood memory you never actually had. The screen rustles. The emperor is awake. You hear a yawn, long, lion-like. Then the screen parts slightly, and a sleepy voice mutters, "The cook today has new hands." You nod, unsure if this is good news or a beheading prompt. The figure steps forward, wrapped in silks embroidered with crane feathers. He looks about 20, and also about 200, as if time isn't entirely consistent in his presence. He raises an eyebrow and takes the bowl from your hands. You resist the urge to bow deeply. Or faint. He sips. Long pause. Needs more osmanthus. He waves you away. You leave the room in stunned silence. The scroll tucked at your waist buzzes faintly. A new section is glowing, its symbol resembles a lotus pod and a flame. Historians still argue whether Tang emperors were genuinely involved in recipe curation. Some scrolls suggest they dabbled, even invented dishes. Others think these attributions were mere flattery, embroidered into legend. But one imperial diary, possibly forged, but still quoted, mentions an emperor demanding over 300 porridge variations, one for each day of the lunar calendar. Back in the kitchen, the mysterious cook stands beside a steaming cauldron. She eyes you coolly. You passed. Barely. Past what? The test. You're not entirely useless. Which is lucky. The scroll chose you. You blink. Scroll? She holds up her own, tied with a braid of black thread and sealed with wax. There are more. Scattered across the empire. Recipes, rituals, memories. You have one. I have another. There were once 10. You ask her name. She pauses. Then, they call me Plum Knife. You hesitate to ask whether that's literal. She leads you to a stone table carved with the characters for fire, water, wood, and flavor. From a hidden drawer, she pulls out jars and bundles wrapped in palm leaves. Dried ingredients. Next dish, she says. For memory. What kind of memory? Yours. And the kitchen's. We start with lotus root. You slice it. The root weeps white sap. It's crunchy, sweet, full of small air tunnels, nature's own edible sponge. You stir it into boiling broth. She adds powdered pearl, chili bean paste, a splash of rice vinegar. It smells divine. And also slightly haunted. You taste it. Everything changes. Suddenly, you're not in the kitchen anymore. You're on a riverboat in midsummer, lotus blossoms swaying on either side. A cook stands beside a small brazier, balancing a wok while the boat rocks gently. Someone laughs in the distance. The air smells of lake water and fish. Plum Knife's voice breaks in, "Welcome to the scroll's memory." You look down. Your hands are younger. Not yours. Not quite. She appears beside you on the boat, completely unbothered by time travel. Each scroll carries echoes of the dishes it recorded. Not just recipes. Moments. People. Emotion. Are we, inside the past? She shrugs. Close enough. The boat rocks. You spill a bit of broth. The vision flickers. Suddenly, you're back in the imperial kitchen, heart racing. The bowl is empty. Good, Plum Knife says. Now you're ready for duck. Of course. Duck. Because nothing says enlightenment like citrus-glazed poultry at 5 a.m. The duck, naturally, is nowhere to be found. Not in the hanging pantry. Not in the stone icebox. Not even among the feathered bundles tucked in rice straw. You're wondering whether this is some sort of riddle when Plum Knife points toward a low wooden door behind the spice rack. The aviary, she says casually, as though emperors always kept live ducks 2 steps from the cinnamon bark. The air shifts as you enter. Warm, damp, with a distinct squelch underfoot that makes you question your footwear choices. Rows of ducks paddle about in shallow indoor troughs, quacking softly like monks reciting prayers with bills. One particularly judgmental mallard eyes you as if it already knows you'll overcook it. Choose wisely, plumb knife calls from the doorway. The emperor prefers ones that look philosophical. You mutter a silent apology to all ducks everywhere and reach for a sleek, silver-feathered one near the back. It pecks your sleeve with tragic acceptance. You carry it, carefully, back through the kitchen halls where no one else seems to be working. Just you. And her. And the scroll, still glowing faintly with the symbol of flame and water. Preparation begins. She shows you how to pluck without tearing the skin. How to massage the bird with baijiu, rice wine strong enough to ignite memory. How to fill the cavity with slivers of tangerine peel, star anise, and green onion, tied tightly with lotus string. The duck is then hung on a hook to dry, slowly, while a fan creaks nearby to mimic northern wind. Now, she says, we wait. You glance at the scroll. Another section starts to glow, a teardrop shape this time. You ask, will it show me another memory? She tilts her head. No. This time, it will feed one to you. As you stare, your vision blurs. You're no longer in the kitchen. You're kneeling in a cold courtyard at dawn, wearing servant's robes. The duck is hanging before you, just as it was, but you're not you. You're someone else. A trembling apprentice about to serve a dish for the New Year banquet. In front of you, nobles shuffle into place. A eunuch calls your name, except it isn't your name. It's Little Leaf. You carry the duck forward. The smell is overwhelming, crisp skin, caramelized sugar, and a hint of citrus so pure it could pass for spring itself. You bow. Present the dish. The Empress Dowager tastes it. Her eyes flicker. A long pause. Then, it reminds me of my mother. Applause. Laughter. A tear. The scene shudders, ripples, fades. Back in the present kitchen, your real hands are trembling. You sit down, breathing hard. Memory can be heavy, plumb knife says. But you carried it well. You wonder aloud, was that real? Historians still argue whether imperial kitchens truly used such complex aromatics, tangerine oil, dried chrysanthemum, 5 fragrance blends. Some scrolls detail impossibly precise rituals: ducks air-dried for 23 hours, turned on the hour, basted with amber honey and hung over pine charcoal. Others dismiss these as exaggerations or poetic flourishes by court scribes desperate to impress. One thing's certain, the Tang Dynasty elevated food to something beyond sustenance. It was status. Art. Memory. Plumb Knife wipes her hands on a silk towel and checks the duck. It's ready. You watch as she slides it into a clay oven fired with apricot wood. The scent is immediate: roasted heaven, warm citrus, crackling skin. The scroll pulses. Another glowing mark. A crane this time. You've done well, she says. But the scroll is far from finished. Where to next, you ask. She opens the kitchen door. Beyond it, not the courtyard. Not Chang'an. But a market square, buzzing with color and noise. Lanterns swinging. Banners flapping. A hawker shouts, "Osmanthus syrup buns." Still warm. You step through. The duck will have to wait. The market air hits you like a warm dumpling to the face, dense, fragrant, and just slightly overwhelming. You blink as the world rearranges itself into color: scarlet tassels, golden melon carts, copper pots glinting under hanging lanterns. Music drifts lazily from somewhere, a 2-stringed arrow playing a lullaby with too many notes. You've stepped directly into the night bazaar of Chang'an. People flow past you like fish in a lazy stream, many in embroidered robes, others barefoot and grinning, slurping noodles while discussing tax reform. A toothless man offers you a tray of sesame candies shaped like tiny monkeys. A girl balances a basket of fermented tofu on her head while singing an off-key opera tune. A goat wanders by, utterly unbothered. Plum Knife walks ahead of you like she's done this before. The scrolls opened a new memory, she murmurs. You'll need to taste your way through this one. You follow her past a stall of stewed lotus seeds, a tea vendor grinding dried chrysanthemum blossoms, and finally, to an old woman hunched beside a wok the size of a bathtub. She's frying youtiao, crispy fried dough sticks, golden and twisted like sleepy dragons. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Plum Knife drops a coin in her bowl, and the woman hands each of you a stick still glistening with oil. You bite. And bam, you're elsewhere. Now you're a child. Barefoot. Sitting on a worn mat next to your father, no, someone else's father, who's breaking youtiao into bowls of soy milk as the morning sun spills through the shutters. The silence is gentle. Safe. You dip the stick, sip the broth, laugh at a bird pecking at the roof. For a moment, there's nothing more sacred than breakfast. The illusion fades as gently as it arrived. You're still chewing. But now the flavor is tinged with nostalgia you didn't earn. Food, Plum Knife says, is the only language that never forgets. The scroll glows again, this time with a pair of chopsticks crossed over a crescent moon. It tingles faintly against your hip. You reach for a steamed bun at the next stall, mushroom, judging by the earthy scent, and as soon as your teeth sink in, another vision pulls you forward. This time, you're inside a small street kitchen. You're stirring a pot of millet porridge while your wife, someone else's wife, adds finely chopped jujube and dates. We should start selling this, she says. You laugh. To whom? Who'd pay for breakfast from a man with no eyebrows? She grins and wipes flour on your cheek. The Tang Dynasty values eyebrows less than flavor. Back in the market, you shake your head as if waking from a dream underwater. These scenes are getting stronger. You're starting to feel full. Not just in your stomach, but in your memory. You ask Plum Knife, am I stealing these lives? She considers this. No. You're borrowing them. And they're borrowing you. Historians still argue whether Chang'an's night markets were truly so extravagant. Some records claim thousands of stalls, some say only hundreds. What's confirmed is that food in Tang-era China was a civic religion. Soldiers were paid partly in vinegar, officials bribed with lychees shipped in snow-packed crates from the south. But the humble breakfast remained sacred: warm rice, fried dough, pickled turnip, and fermented soy, a quiet ritual in a noisy world. You pass a stall selling sugar sculptures molded into phoenixes. A child licks the wing off one and immediately starts sobbing. A man nearby is hawking preserved duck tongues on skewers, yelling, "Buy 10, get a ghost story free." A vendor tugs your sleeve. He's selling tea eggs soaked in spiced soy. You take one. Bite. And suddenly, you're in a rainstorm. Inside a stone kitchen, you're huddled near a fire with a steaming pot of tea eggs. A traveler knocks at the door. You open it, hand him a bowl. He smiles. You say nothing. Neither does he. Just steam, silence, and salted yolk. Back in the bazaar, the egg is gone. Your hands are empty. But your heart feels strangely full. Like a bowl of soup you didn't know you needed. You turn to Plum Knife. How many more memories? She smiles faintly. As many as the scroll can hold. The wind shifts. Lanterns flicker. Somewhere far off, a gong chimes midnight. The mark. You don't even notice the market dissolving until the sounds go quiet, first the hawkers, then the footsteps, then the music, like someone slowly turning the volume knob of the universe. When you blink again, you're indoors, or maybe underground. It's dim, cool, and dry. The air smells like ink, charcoal, and very old garlic. You're in a storage room. No, not just any room, an archive. Scrolls line the walls in organized chaos, stacked high like noodles in a scholar's nightmare. Some are tied with red twine, others sealed with wax. You spot titles in elegant brushwork, preserved plum ratios for maritime travel, the 13 curries of Luoyang, and curiously, How to cure a bad marriage using pickled eggs. Plum knife appears behind you. You've reached the vault. A small wooden table in the center holds a single object, the Tang Dynasty scroll. Except now, it's open. Unfurled halfway, symbols glowing faintly in soft gold, bamboo shoots, a carp, a mooncake. As you stare, a new glyph emerges from the parchment-like mist, a bowl of congee, steam curling upward into the shape of a dragon. You reach out, and the room dissolves again. Now you're in a kitchen, but not imperial. This one's cramped, smoky, bustling with children underfoot and clay pots stacked precariously on wooden shelves. You're stirring a pot of rice porridge while your grandmother, someone else's again, adds strips of dried fish and chopped scallions. The taste is warm, bland, kind. The kind of meal that holds your hand rather than impresses your palate. Plum knife's voice whispers beside you, this one was never written down. Only remembered. You ask why. Because the best dishes lived in kitchens without scribes. Historians still argue whether Tang cuisine was truly documented in detail or if the scrolls we have are overly poetic interpretations. The famous Shijing cookbook, now mostly lost, was said to contain more than just recipes. It had notes on seasonal ingredient selection, flavor moods, and even ideal background music for pickling. One fringe theory claims some scrolls were encrypted, written only in rhyme or metaphor. A dish described as crane landing on snowy bamboo might have just been cold noodles and sesame sauce. Who's to say? You're handed a bowl. It's a sweet almond tofu pudding, soft as sleep and delicately perfumed. You take a bite. In the next heartbeat, you're transported to an open courtyard where children are chasing fireflies under the summer moon, laughing between mouthfuls of the same pudding. The joy isn't dramatic, it's the kind that lives in stomachs, not in scrolls. You return to the archive room. Scroll still open. The bowl is gone. Your hands are empty, but you feel sticky with memory. You glance around. One shelf catches your eye, it's crooked. Behind it, a shadow. You pull it aside and reveal a hidden alcove. Dust motes hang like tiny ghosts in the air. Inside, one scroll. Different parchment. Black ribbon. Faded characters. You blow off the dust and whisper the title aloud, Dishes of the Disgraced. Plum knife raises an eyebrow. Not every dish had the emperor's approval. You unroll it slowly. Recipes written by dismissed chefs, exiled monks, and kitchen rebels who boiled what they weren't supposed to. Pine needle wine. Forbidden fungus jelly. Stewed badger, optional, replace with mushroom. You pause. People actually cook this stuff? She shrugs. People will eat anything if they believe it brings luck. There's a peculiar one written vertically, River Ghost Hot Pot. Underneath, a line of faded brushwork reads, best prepared when you've lost everything but hope. You touch the ink. The room sways. Now you're in a hut on the edge of a swollen river. Rain lashes the roof. You're alone, scraping together a meal from wild ginger, river snail, and crushed rice flour. You've been banished. Or maybe you left by choice. The hot pot simmers. You eat. And despite the bitterness, you feel whole. Back in the archive, the glow from the scrolls dims. These memories, you whisper, they're not just food. No, Plum Knife agrees. They're stories people couldn't afford to forget. You ask if the scroll is complete. Not yet, she says. We still haven't reached the court's greatest culinary scandal. Of course. Because even in the most elegant dynasties, someone always burns the emperor. The scene around you shifts again, like paper catching flame. Ash becomes air, air becomes sound, and now you're stepping through lacquered doors into a different kitchen, one that smells of prestige and trouble. This is the imperial kitchen at Chang'an, the heart of the Tang Dynasty, and you can feel the hierarchy in the way the cooks chop vegetables, carefully, nervously, like every radish slice is being judged by heaven. The floors gleam. The air is thick with steam and ego. A towering chef with silver-threaded robes and a thin mustache barks orders in a cadence halfway between poetry and threat. you're handed a cleaver. Slice the lotus root into coins, he commands, not into disappointment. You oblige, trying not to inhale the anxiety. Behind him, rows of apprentices fan braziers and reduce sauces with a reverence usually reserved for royal scrolls. But the tension in the room is more than just culinary ambition. Something's off. Something scandalous happened here, didn't it? You murmur. Plum knife appears beside you, sampling a spoonful of broth and wincing. Salted too early. Probably the poet's fault. You blink. The what now? She points to a young man sulking in the corner beside a pile of leeks. That's Wen Dao Xian. Official title, Assistant Undersauce Supervisor. Unofficial title, Secret Poet of the Imperial Pantry. You suppress a chuckle as she continues. He wrote an epic ode comparing the emperor's dumplings to clouds kissing the earth. Problem was, he also compared the empress's pigeon stew to stagnant pond water. Oh. The scandal that followed, known among Tang historians as the Great Dumpling Debacle, wasn't just about metaphor. It was about loyalty, power, and one particularly unlucky spice mix. Apparently, the emperor had commissioned a new dish for the mid-autumn feast, a delicate dumpling stuffed with minced duck, jujube paste, and mountain truffle. It was Wen's job to oversee the preparation, but he accidentally substituted fermented yam for truffle. The result? A texture best described as politely slimy and a flavor like sour regret. The Empress, meanwhile, had been planning her own dish, pigeon stew with lotus seeds. And here's where it gets messy. A jealous court lady allegedly bribed the kitchen staff to swap the seasoning sachets between the two dishes. Historians still argue whether the sachet switch was sabotage or a clumsy mix-up caused by identical silk packaging. Either way, both dishes bombed. The dumpling was politely spat into a napkin by the emperor, and the stew gave 3 ministers a mild rash. The fallout was immense. Wen was demoted to radish peeling. The Empress fasted for 3 days in protest. And the Master of Kitchens, once a revered culinary sage, was reassigned to ceremonial incense duty, forever banished from broth. You sneak a taste of the infamous dumpling. Honestly? Not that bad. A little tangy. Kind of chewy. Probably wouldn't trigger a scandal unless your palate was as delicate as a porcelain vase. Back in the kitchen, a new scroll is being written. Not by a scribe, but by Wen, using squid ink and rice paper, documenting the whole ordeal in passive-aggressive haiku. One of them reads, "Truffle, not truffle. Taste lingers like exile does. Pigeon, forgive me." You watch as the scroll is slipped into a hollowed-out bamboo spoon and hidden beneath the stone hearth. A backup recipe, maybe. Or a confession. Plum knife whispers, the real recipe wasn't lost. It was buried. You ask where. She grins. We'll get there. But first, she says, you need to understand the secret structure of the imperial kitchen. The compartments. The coded menus. The pantry of exile. You blink at that one. Yes, she confirms. A literal pantry. For banished dishes. Recipes deemed too eccentric, too dangerous, or just too weird to serve again. A bell rings in the distance. Lunchtime for the lower court. Suddenly, you're carrying trays of rejected dishes to the back courtyard, tiger lily salad, turtle eggs on ice, mung bean wine. You set them on a stone table. A monk joins you, smiling faintly. This one cured my melancholy, he says, pointing to a lukewarm bowl of pickled squash. You ask if he's a chef. Only to ghosts, he replies. And just like that, the wind shifts. In the distance, a scent drifts toward you, something smoky, spiced, nostalgic. The pantry of exile waits. You step into a grand hall that hums like an overexcited cicada chorus, the air thick with incense smoke and the rustle of silk. Low tables are arranged in concentric circles around a raised dais where scholars recline on cushions like lotus blooms. The lanterns overhead sway gently, casting waves of light across silver platters heaped with steaming delicacies. About announcement echoes, the banquet's first course is served, and it's not just food. A rosy pink slice of sweet osmanthus glazed pork arrives, accompanied by the recitation of a couplet. Soft petals cling to autumn noons. And in your taste, the moon attunes. You take a bite. The pork is tender, flecked with gold leaf, the fragrance of orange blossoms dancing on your tongue. You swallow and applaud, though half your mind is still parsing the rhyme. Historians still argue whether Tang scholars genuinely held these rhyme-based feasts or if later poets embroidered the tradition for romance's sake. Next comes a platter of rice flour cakes molded into miniature lotus pods. Before you can reach for one, a sharp voice declares a poetry duel between two esteemed literati, Master Li and Mistress Shui. They stand, holding brushes dipped in squid ink, and gaze at the cake as if it were the moon itself. Master Li begins. Sugar petals soft as sighs. Bloom on tongues where memory lies. Mistress Shui counters. In each sweet orb, a hidden sea. Where time dissolves in reverie. The hall erupts in polite laughter and murmurs. You nibble a cake, slightly chewy, with a surprising hint of toasted sesame, and wonder if you're tasting sugar or allegory. A court official nearby nudges you. Next course, he whispers, is the real duel. That course is a soup, chrysanthemum petals swirling in a milky broth scented with bamboo shoots. As the servers proffer bowls, two more scholars rise, one wielding a scroll of recipes and the other clutching a new dish, preserved bamboo rat, delicately spiced. The rat, it's said, was prized for its lean meat and earthy flavor, though you'd never confirm that at a modern dinner party. The scroll holder recites. Bamboo rat, by streamside sown. Yield secrets only suppers known. The dish-bearer retorts. Lean and lithe, it walks the line. Between the wild and human dine. You brave a taste. It's surprisingly gamey, grassy, with a toothsome bite. A stray guest chokes on laughter, either at the word rat or the poetry itself, you can't tell. You swallow and force a smile, hoping no one notices. Between courses, musicians play zither and pipa, their strings humming lullabies that feel too sweet for daylight. You close your eyes. The song and soup blend, floral, metallic, ancient, and for a moment you drift, weightless. Awakening, you find a new course, translucent dumplings shaped like dew-laden chrysanthemums, each hiding a pearl of liquid sugar that bursts warmly on your tongue. A scholar recites. Dew-kissed folds, each sweetness stored. A fleeting kiss by heaven poured. The line hangs in the smoky air. Someone coughs in appreciation. You laugh softly, 3 jokes in, you've lost count. Probably at the absurdity of competing over dumplings and rhyming couplets, but also because your stomach's halfway to surrender. A hush falls as the final pair of duelists rise. They're both renowned for their love of obscure ingredients. One unveils a plate of cinnabar-dusted pheasant tongue, an oddity some claim was eaten for its speech-enhancing properties, though modern chefs dismiss it as a courtly myth. The other presents a chrysanthemum-infused peach foam, whipped so light it floats upward. They exchange verses in rapid fire. Pheasant tongue, the speech you claim, echoes truths beyond all name. Peach foam's breath, a dream revealed. Soft illusions gently sealed. You taste both. The tongue is chewy, oddly perfumed, and you pretend not to gag. The foam melts like a marshmallow kissed by dawn. As the duel ends, the hall bursts into applause, cushions shifting like koi in a pond. You sit back, belly comfortably protesting, mind racing with verse and flavor. Plum knife appears at your elbow, offering a small glass of rice wine steeped with gardenias. You sip, it's sweet, warming, and you feel all the edges of your senses soften. She whispers, ready for the next memory? You nod, placing the empty glass on a low table carved with hummingbirds and camellias. Outside, the night deepens, and somewhere far off a gong repeats at intervals, marking time in silence. You rise, clutching the scroll now pulsing faintly with a quilambole symbol. Behind you, the banquet continues, courses still to come, poems still to be born. But for now, you step toward the lantern-lit corridor, anticipation humming in your veins. And just like that, you're led onward, to a new flavor, a new verse, a new fragment of the Tang's culinary soul. You emerge into a courtyard that smells of vinegar, smoke, and something sweetly sulphurous, like burnt sugar singing under high heat. Lanterns strung between bamboo poles cast warm pools of light on shallow vats filled with brine-tinged water. Steam curls from one barrel, wisps dancing like miniature dragons before vanishing. Placed beside the vats are neat rows of hollowed eggshells, each tinted a deep crimson. These are the legendary phoenix eggs, or so the scroll claims, eggs pickled in a secret concoction of vinegar, tea leaves, and powdered safflower. Their color is uncanny, halfway between a sunset and a bruise. You lift one gently, its shell slick with brine and faintly warm to the touch. You crack it open. The membrane sighs, and you lift the half-egg to your lips. The first taste is vinegary shock, like a sea storm in your mouth. Then comes mellow sweetness, a hint of camellia oil, and something unplaceable, something smoky, perfumed, as though the egg absorbed the scent of silk curtains fluttering in autumn. You swallow. For a heartbeat, you feel reborn, phoenix-like. Then your stomach rumbles in complaint. Historians still argue whether these eggs were truly a Tang delicacy or later invention by alchemists seeking immortality. Some surviving texts describe them as a beauty secret, eating one daily would brighten your complexion. Others dismiss that as court gossip spun into legend. You examine the shell fragments scattered on a low stone bench. One shard glints in the lantern light, etched delicately with a tiny flame emblem. The scroll symbol for this section pulses on your hip, two intertwining feathers. You peck at another egg despite the complaint from your insides. The vendor, a rotund man in a velvet cap, watches you with mild curiosity. He doesn't speak but offers you a ceramic cup of hot tea made from osmanthus and chrysanthemum. You sip, the floral warmth chasing the vinegar through your senses, a perfect counterpoint. You ask Plum Knife, do real phoenixes ever feature in Tang cookery? She shrugs. Only the ones you taste. A scholar nearby overhears and mutters, they say faux eggs were made from sea salt and red dye. He waves a dismissive hand. Fraud far too common in the markets. You roll your eyes, fake phoenix eggs? Next they'll claim rainbow trout were actual rainbows. Quirkily, some poets wrote couplets about phoenix eggs on fine silk banners, hoping the imagery would infuse the dish with poetic flavor. One surviving fragment reads, crimson shell, rebirth's brink, a single bite, and time re-winks. You sniff, perhaps a hint of poetic air mixed in your meal. You wander past stacked baskets of preserved radish and drift to a small brazier where a cook is torching egg edges until they hiss like cicadas. The heat makes the brine vapors rise in spirals, and you inhale deeply, eyes closing, enjoying the slight burn in your nose. You crack a third egg, feeling like a daredevil at an imperial carnival. The taste this time is softer, salt bridging into savory umami, the yolk firm but coated in translucent pink sheen. It feels illicit, thumbing a ride on history's back. Historians still argue whether these eggs were flavored with actual safflower petals or if that was simply a poetic way to describe the vivid hue. Evidence is murky, most safflower remains impossible to trace. Some jars found in tombs contain only vinegar residue and iron oxide from clay. Spoiler, it's hard to preserve color underwater. A child scuttles by, clutching a single phoenix egg as though it were treasure. He offers it to you solemnly. You hesitate, then accept. You eat it with ceremony, bowing to the courtyard breeze as though honoring an ancient rite. Somewhere, a rooster crows, an anachronism so perfect it feels choreographed. You lick the last bit of brine from your fingertips and realize your tongue tastes of legend. The scroll's glow dims, then flickers, signaling the next chapter, perhaps the most scandalous memory yet, or maybe a ghost story disguised as a recipe. But for a moment, you simply stand in that brine-scented courtyard, phoenix egg shell shards at your feet, imagining what it would be like to truly rise from the ashes, one pickled bite at a time. You step into the inner court's kitchen at twilight, lanterns dripping light onto earthenware jars and copper ladles. The room is hushed, save for distant echoes of dripping water and the occasional metallic clink. Your footsteps sound too loud, heavy, like you're trespassing on a long-forgotten lullaby. Plum knife leads you past rows of empty vessels, their insides coated with ghostly residue, pepper, ginger, lotus sap. These pots, she whispers, remember every meal ever cooked. Her words hang in the steam, which drifts like a silent waltz. Suddenly, a drawer slides open on its own. You jerk back. Inside, dust motes swirl into the shape of a hand. A faint scent of wasabi, the pungent kick slicing through the sweet aroma of jasmine tea, floats toward you. Ghosts, Plum Knife says, unfazed. Kitchen ghosts. You swallow hard. Wasabi-scented ghosts seem reasonable among scroll-animated memories. Historians still argue whether palace kitchens ever experienced what they called lingering essences, residual energies thought to animate cast-off tools and pottery. Some claimed it was spiritual, others blamed mold. But tonight, the drawer has its own agenda. A low murmur sweeps the room, a chorus of half-heard voices chanting menu items. You press your ear to a ceramic bowl, stew of 10 spices, lotus root in spring water, cold tofu with pine pollen. The chant loops, unhurried, as though reciting a sacred liturgy. Plum Knife hands you a wooden ladle. We're here to settle their debts. You squint. Their debts? She nods. They demand one last dish. A recipe never served. A guilt offering. You exhale, steadying your nerves. What's the dish? She points to a soot-darkened hearth, where a single charcoal ember glows. The wok of regret. A battered iron wok rests on the embers. Inside, charcoal white ashes swirl like cloud ghosts. We fill it with what they missed. You kneel and examine the wok. Etched on its rim are characters, for the chef who burned the emperor's feast. You recall the great dumpling debacle, Chef Wen Daoxuan's misstep. Could this be connected? Plum Knife gathers ingredients, aged plum vinegar, fermented chili paste, sweet rice flour, and a pinch of ghost pepper, strictly metaphorical, she assures you. You stir the plum vinegar into a paste, smooth and deep crimson. Then you fold in rice flour, forming a paste that feels heavy, like a promise. Finally, the chili paste, slow red currents weaving through the mixture. As you mix, the wok shudders. Tiny, smoky figures rise from the ashes, shapes of cooks long gone, hair gray as ash, eyes hollow with unmet ambition. They hover, chanting, as you ladle the paste into the glowing pan. The moment the paste touches the embers, a low moan echoes. The wok, ghostly hot, sizzles, and a faint scent of charred longing drifts through the room. You lean in, inhaling notes of caramelized vinegar, nutty rice, and something coppery, like tears on metal. The ghosts swirl faster. Their whispering rises, regret. Regret. They point at you, then at Plum Knife, then at the scroll, as though seeking acknowledgement. You stand and bow deeply. We offer this recipe, and we remember every burnt moment. The wok's sizzle quiets. The ember dims. The ghosts hover still, then fade, their whispers dissolving into silence. The room feels lighter, no longer burdened. Only the aroma of the regret paste remains. You taste a tiny dab, flavor sharp as sorrow, sweet as apology, earthy as memory. It settles in your chest, warm and final. Plum Knife pockets a bit of the paste. For future chefs who err. You exhale. The scroll on your hip pulses once, then shifts, its symbol now a pale wisp. Memory delivered, it seems to say. Outside, the courtyard night breeze drifts in, rustling bamboo leaves in gentle applause. The kitchen ghosts are at peace. You dust off your robes. The final chapters await, treacherous salt maps, chili-laced dumplings, and the dish that changes history. But for a moment, you savor the silence. The moment the paste touches the embers, a low moan echoes. The wok, ghostly hot, sizzles, and a faint scent of charred longing drifts through the room. You lean in, inhaling notes of caramelized vinegar, nutty rice, and something coppery, like tears on metal. You follow Plum Knife through a narrow service corridor, the walls slick with condensation and the faint echo of dripping water. The scroll pulses again, its glow now shaped like a salt crystal. You press your palm to the parchment, ice-cold, granular, as though the document itself had absorbed centuries of brine. Beyond a low door, plumb knife gestures you in. Inside, a single lamp casts a pool of light on a massive map spread across a stone table. It's not an ordinary map. The lines aren't provinces or rivers but thin red trails, routes of salt caravans snaking across the empire. Tiny stamped seals mark salt wells, harbor depots, and official granaries. But someone's overwritten parts in faded cinnabar, small circles around remote towns, dotted lines veering off the main roads, annotations in a hidden script. You kneel beside the table and trace a path with your finger. Each twist seems deliberate, routes that avoid government checkpoints, heading instead through mountain passes, river fords, and ghost towns. You follow one corridor from the Sichuan salt mines, past Chengdu, then climbing into the Tibetan foothills, where you find a tiny drawing of a lantern and the note, "Safe House of the Silver Spade." Another arrow points south to Yunnan, scribbled, "Where salt meets silver." Historians still argue whether Tang officials actually monitored salt routes so closely or if many maps were red herrings to mislead bandits. Some surviving government records claim salt inspectors rode the roads daily, others suggest bribery ran so deep that maps were useless. But this map, feels illicit. You reach for a small dish on the table. It contains coarse white crystals and a brush. Plum Knife hands you a bowl of water scented with rice vinegar. "Reveal the hidden script," she whispers. You dip the brush into the vinegar water and paint across the map's surface. The acid reacts with the overinked annotations, turning the hidden notes a soft blue, ripe for revolt, supplies cached here, and meet at dawn, full moon. A rattle of metal on stone makes you start. Plum Knife smiles wryly. Culinary codes were the perfect cover. Who would suspect a recipe map? She tells you of one rebellious chef official who hid a coordinate within the ratios for pickled radish, ratios designed to be memorized by cooks but never by tax collectors. You grin, recalling the tofu tax riot back in Section 6. The same underground kitchens that staged protests over bean curd quotas must have used maps like this to smuggle food to hungry insurgents. You run your finger along a route that leads to a cluster of villages in the Xi'an Plains. One annotation reads, "Salt demand, feed the hungry. Salt rebellion, starve the official." A tiny chuckle escapes you. The subversive humor isn't lost on you. Salt burners, Plum Knife says, were more feared than sword wielders. They could cripple the treasury overnight. You pause, tasting the air. There's a faint mineral tang, like standing beside an ocean, only you're hundreds of miles from any sea. The lamp flickers, and the map seems to shift, the salt routes realigning, new circles marking hidden oases. You ask how many cooks knew these secrets. She answers, only those bound by oath and hunger. She leans over and points to the map's legend, a tiny phoenix symbol next to the words "Rebel Kitchens of the Exiled." You recall Section 9's phoenix eggs, food used to symbolize rebirth. Here, the same symbol marks kitchens fueling revolt. You step back as the scroll glows once more, its glow now a pair of crossed spoons. Plum Knife nods. We've decoded enough for one night. You look at the map, its red trails now familiar. Salt, the empire's lifeblood, was also its Achilles heel. A pinch too little, and you starve armies, a dash too much, and you enrich brigands. As you turn to leave, you pause. Do these rebels still exist? You murmur. She shrugs. Some traditions endure. The salt map was buried, but not destroyed. You tuck the scroll beneath your robes, the residue of vinegar still on your fingers. Outside the room, the corridor's darkness seems deeper, more expectant. The empire itself feels like a delicate balance, held together by spice, grain, and the knowledge hidden in kitchen corners. Ahead lies the chili-laced dumpling recipe, waiting to inflame appetites, and perhaps something more. You step into a small, dimly lit chamber that smells of chili, ginger, and something faintly metallic, as though the air itself sizzles. On a low stone table lies the final scroll, unadorned except for 4 simple characters in bold cinnabar, spicy fragrant dumplings. You unroll it on a bed of coarse salt, the parchment crackling like embers under your fingertips. The scroll's symbol, a pair of entwined chili pods, glows softly. Plum Knife crouches beside you, her eyes reflecting torchlight. This recipe, she whispers, was rumored to be an imperial aphrodisiac. Some claim it inspired secret trysts in hidden pavilions. You smirk. Historians still argue whether Tang elites actually believed in culinary love spells or if that's later erotic gossip. She nods. Either way, the recipe was locked away after complications. You read the ingredients: finely minced lotus seeds for texture, fermented bean curd for depth, powdered saffron for color, and, most intriguingly, a crushed root called xiangfu, believed to stimulate desire. A mainstream fact, xiangfu or Cyperus rotundus was indeed recorded in Tang medical texts as a mild stimulant and fragrance. You gather the ingredients, noting one spicy tidbit: the original scroll calls for chili peppers, oddly, centuries before chilies arrived in China, suggesting a very different pepper was used or that later scribes retrofitted the text. Scholars suspect a mistranslation from sea pepper to capsicum, a delightful fringe theory that makes you chuckle. You knead the dough, wheat flour, rice water, and a drop of jasmine oil, until it's smooth and pale. You roll it thin, each circle pressed to your palm like a tiny invitation. The filling goes in next: lotus seed paste blended with bean curd, saffron threads creating golden streaks, and a whisper of crushed xiangfu root. As you fold each dumpling, you murmur the scroll's prescribed chant, a soft rhyme promising heated hearts and whispered breaths. It feels theatrical, borderline absurd, but so did layering 30 spices in porridge back in section 3, and that worked, sort of. You place the dumplings in a steaming basket over boiling broth scented with osmanthus and green tea. The steam curls upward, carrying an aroma that's warm, floral, and undeniably suggestive, like rose petals on a lover's pillow. You lift the lid. Plum Knife inhales deeply. If this doesn't work, she jokes, nothing will. You taste one. The wrapper is tender, the filling is savory sweet, saffron flickering like candlelight on your tongue, the xiangfu root adding an earthy, almost musky undercurrent. The chili heat arrives in gentle waves, never overwhelming, teasing at the edges of sensation. A sudden warmth spreads through your chest. Your pulse feels louder in your ears. Your thoughts drift lazily to, well, things you probably shouldn't think about right now. The scroll pulses again, its final glow, and you realize the aphrodisiac rumors might not be pure myth. You look at Plum Knife, eyebrows raised. She winks. Complications, she says, included too much passion in the wrong places. Secret rendezvous in the hallways, duels over stolen dumplings, even an alleged betrothal broken by a single bite. You raise an eyebrow. That much drama over dumplings? She grins. In the Tang court? Food was power, and romance was politics. Historians still argue whether any of those scandals actually occurred or if they're just deliciously embellished. But one record from a disgraced concubine mentions, "Heat in my bones no herb could match," possibly referring to these dumplings, a line so evocative it feels like culinary prophecy. You steam a few more dumplings and set them on a lacquer tray. Outside, candlelight flickers on carved pillars. The chamber feels charged, alive. You realize each section of the scroll isn't just a recipe, it's a story of human desire, power, and the ways flavor intertwines with fate. As you tuck the emptied baskets away, you feel both satiated and curious. The scroll's last symbol fades. You've unlocked its deepest secret, an intimate blend of spices meant to kindle more than appetite. Plum Knife dips a dumpling in honeyed vinegar and hands it to you. You take a bite, gentle heat, golden saffron, the whisper of xiangfu root, and close your eyes. For an instant, you glimpse flickering lanterns in hidden corridors, hushed laughter, and silk against marble. Then you're back in the chamber, breath slightly ragged, scroll closed. The torchlight dances across the stone walls. You realize this memory is as much about people as it is about food, the intimate moments forever flavored by one enticing bite. You stand, scroll in hand, ready to return to the surface world. The the final dish has spoken. You emerge into the grandest hall yet, a vaulted chamber where amber lanterns hang like sleepy fireflies and marble columns twist skyward. In the center, a long table is set with jade plates and gilded chopsticks. At its head sits a lacquered box bearing the imperial seal. Plum Knife glances at you, a flicker of anticipation in her eyes. This, she whispers, is where the final recipe lives. You approach the box, heart hammering. Inside, nestled in silk, is a parchment smaller than the others, its inka-deep obsidian. The title reads Dynasty's Last Feast. You unroll it carefully. The final dish, a layered pastry called Moon's Farewell, made of wheat flour, honeyed dates, candied ginger, and one rare ingredient, ambergris harvested from the river Silk's banks during a blue moon. Mainstream fact, ambergris, once used in Tang perfumery, was indeed prized for its rarity and scent, though records of it in cookery are scant. Historians still argue whether cooks ever dared to bake with ambergris or if that's courtly hearsay, you recall. Plum Knife sets out the steps. You mix flour and hot water into a pliant dough, setting aside small balls. You pit dates and crush them with candied ginger until they glimmer like sunset. You fold honey into the mixture, and finally stir in a tiny pinch of powdered ambergris, so little that it could be mistaken for dust. The scroll instructs you to whistle a lullaby as you need. You give it a go, a shaky tune you learned as a child, and for a moment, the hall seems to sigh in response. You roll the dough balls flat, spoon the date ginger filling, and fold them into neat crescents. Each is brushed with a syrup of rice wine and chrysanthemum petals, giving them a soft, pale glow. Then, they're baked on heated marble slabs, an odd method more common in palace lore than street kitchens. Quirky tidbit, some chefs believe the marble's coolness preserved the pastry's internal aroma, a fringe idea that seems absurd until you try it. The hall fills with a warm, honeyed scent. You plate the pastries on jade and present them to a silent assembly of carved stone ancestors lining the walls. Plum Knife lights a row of camphor oil lamps, their flame steady and golden. She hands you a platter and nods toward a raised dais where a figure in royal robes awaits, a memory projection of the last Tang emperor. He rises, spectral, and bows. You offer him a Moon's Farewell pastry. He takes it, his translucent fingers brushing yours. He bites. The hall trembles slightly, a hush cascading over marble and lantern alike. He closes his eyes. A single tear, amber bright, traces down his cheek. Outside, in your real world, the scroll's glow dims to a whisper. You feel a shift in the air, as if the empire's end and beginning pulse together in that breath. You realize this recipe was never just food, it was a symbol of continuity, of hope that even as one dynasty fades, flavor endures. You glance at Plum Knife. She offers you a crescent pastry. You taste it. Warm dates, candied ginger spice, honey smooth hum, and beneath it all, the faintest marine note of ambergris, like memory rising from the depths. You lean against a column. Your journey through memories, tastes, and times feels momentarily complete. The final dish has spoken of endings and beginnings, of power folded into pastry, of people who believed flavor could transcend history. You tuck the small scroll back into its silk, heart full and senses humming. The lantern light shimmers. The carved ancestors nod, imperceptibly, in silent farewell. And now, with the last memory served, you prepare to step back into your own time. The scroll is quiet. The air smells of honey and jasmine. You breathe deeply, feeling centuries of kitchens exhale around you. The lantern's glow softens as you rise and step away from the table, your footsteps echoing in that vast chamber. Time stretches, each moment a droplet of honey sliding slowly into the next. You feel warmth in your chest, a gentle radiance from the pastries still lingering on your tongue. In this quiet space, the whirlwind of scents, jasmine, honey, ginger, coalesces into a soothing lullaby. Your breathing eases, each inhale drawing in history's calm, each exhale releasing the thrill of discovery. The world outside grows distant, like a dream on the verge of waking, and you find yourself cradled in the hush. Remember the market's clamor, the kitchen's hiss, the crack of phoenix egg shells? Let those echoes fade gently now, replaced by the soft cadence of your own heartbeat. The scroll's secrets rest in your mind, tucked away like precious spice jars on a shelf, ready to nourish you whenever you need them. There's no urgency here. Only suspended moments, each one a whisper of past lives and flavors that once shaped empires. You may not see Plum Knife again, but her silhouette lingers at the edge of your vision, always guiding, always waiting with another taste, another memory. As you turn toward the exit, the lanterns dim further, and the carved ancestors seem to slope into repose. You carry the warmth of the moon's farewell with you, its golden sweetness a secret ember glowing long after the feast has ended. Step lightly now, and let the chamber's hush accompany you as you leave. The scroll's final glow has faded, but its stories remain, woven into the tapestry of your dreams. And so, as the night enfolds you like a soft blanket, may you drift into sleep cradled by the memory of honeyed dates, candied ginger, and the gentle flicker of amber lantern light. End of script. Sweet dreams.